Okay, guys, we're gonna start in a few seconds. Can I ask all the panel members to just mute their microphones, and then I will start with the welcome address, and then I will hand over to you, Batabile, once I'm done. So if you can all mute your microphones, and then I will start with the welcome. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to everyone on this cold evening. Thank you very much for joining in. My name is Tukela Matubatuba. I am one of the co-founders and directors of an NGO called Languni. The webinar this evening is Languni's contribution to the celebration of Youth Month, and more specifically Youth Day, which is observed on the 16th of June annually in South Africa. Today, we reflect on the youth's perspective on the jobs of the future, as we remember the youth of 1976 who fought for what they believe in. And sadly, most of them lost their lives during the process. Please allow me to take a few minutes to share about what Languni is. So Languni was founded by 3 South African young women who came together with the vision of creating content that educates, guides, and inspires society. Languni hopes to contribute to creating a platform that will enable collaboration firstly, and also sharing of knowledge. The organization focuses on a variety of issues such as indigenous knowledge, education, food, nutrition, health, wellness, science and technology, to name a few. At the end of this webinar, my colleague and also the co-founder of Languni, Refilwe Mashego, will share the contact details of the organization as well as the social media platforms. In 2020, the youth faces a number of challenges, such as substance abuse, mental health problems, peer pressure, poverty, as the statistics also indicate the increasing unemployment rate. The coronavirus pandemic also brought some challenges and has negatively affected the economy. We hope that the webinar will inform, will also educate and be fruitful to you. We will also hear from a very dynamic panel of young, innovative individuals. They will share with us their career journeys and experiences. Our moderator for this evening is Dr. Batabile Ramalapa. She is a biotechnologist working at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, in Pretoria, South Africa. Dr. Ramalapa's biography is very impressive. She has over 10 years working experience in biopharmaceuticals with international partners. She has also published a number of journals. In conclusion, as I hand over the program to Dr. Ramalapa, Languni would like to acknowledge the recent increase of horrific violent killings and rape of young women and children of South Africa. Let's stand together and fight against gender-based violence, because the future is in our hands. Dr. Ramalapa, I officially hand over the program to you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tugela, and a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us this evening for this insightful webinar. I hope that we'll have fruitful discussions and that everyone who's part of this webinar will be able to take up a little something in how they can prepare and partake in the economy, the mainstream economy in South Africa, and prepare themselves for the jobs of the future. So while we at it, I'd like to say to everyone participating in this webinar that please go on to social media, and I think we can use the hashtag that Languni shared throughout. It's hashtag jobs for the future. So whatever information we get from here, if it's informative to you, it will be informative and useful to other people. So let's share along with the hashtag jobs for the future. As Tugela has mentioned, I've worked in biotechnology research for about 10 years. The main reason for taking up a career in scientific research was that I wanted to see a future where, as Africans, we would be able to provide solutions to our challenges, solutions that are tailor-made to the culture and the economic climate in Africa. I now work in one of the leading research institutions in Africa, and I see it as my responsibility to assist and empower young people with access to information and the resources needed to advance the South African bioeconomy in terms of developing products that can cater for the unmet needs in health and agriculture and other biotechnology spaces in Africa. So as Tugela has mentioned, South Africa is a country that is faced with a high unemployment rate. And not only that, but young people in South Africa, even when they are employed, can find themselves being excluded from most of the economical activities of the country and not even benefiting from the economic progress that the country is making. And as someone who has gone through the educational system all the way up to PhD level, I have learned from experience that educational qualifications are only just a tip of the iceberg when it comes to partaking in economical activity in our country. So as the young people of South Africa and Africa as a whole, we need to find ways to break new ground and be innovative in exploiting and creating employment opportunities, not just for ourselves, but for the larger population, so that we can create a legacy for future generations, just like the youth of 1976 did. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Languni for affording us the platform to have this much needed conversation. And this evening, as already mentioned, I am joined by 3 powerful young innovative panelists who will share with us their journeys and their insights into how the youth of today can prepare themselves for the jobs of the future. So let me start off with the young lady, Miss Kabetswe Ncube, who is the CEO of Kia Ncube Agri-Services. Like, I'm already impressed. And so Kia will introduce herself to us and tell us about her journey and her story as to how she became the CEO of Kia Ncube Agri-Services. So one thing that I think Kia is currently doing her PhD. So I want to know from you, Kia, in your opinion, is the South African government, the South African educational system, doing what is needed in order to prepare the South African youth for the jobs of the future? Over to you, Kia.
Thank you, Dr. Bathabile, and good evening to our attendees. Good evening to the panelists. I would like to start by thanking Languni and the organizers for putting together this webinar. As it has been mentioned before, I'm the founder and CEO of Giancube Agri-Services, and I'm a PhD candidate doing my doctoral studies with the Agricultural Research Service, focusing on goat growth and meat genetics. So my company mainly offers scientific farming solutions, where I work with farmers and I help them to improve their farming using scientific methods for maximum yield. I do this through consultation, research, training, which is through workshops and one-on-one interactions, mentorship, and I also sell meat because I'm experienced in meat science and genetics. So I converted my project into that business. I look at certified A grade and well-studied meat. So I'd like to move on to answering the question on whether our government is responding to the demands of the jobs of the future. I would say yes, it does. However, there are two gaps in the system. The first gap is that you only see this response during postgraduate level. And secondly, the undergraduate students and the basic education learners have no idea how to get into these programs that are made available to us by the government. So those are the two gaps. And I believe we are not doing enough to raise that kind of awareness. But today, I'm only going to focus on postgraduate education as a response, and how one can be in postgraduate program by sharing snippets of my journey with the Agricultural Research Council, and how through that I came to start my company. I must begin by saying that postgraduate is a eat or be eaten kind of ball game. So one cannot have a dependency mentality if you really want to succeed in the field. So you have to be an independent individual. My journey with ARC began during my experiential learning at TUT, where part of my undergraduate studies were funded by the Gauteng Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. So during this time, we were requested to attend a conference. And by then I went to the ABIC, which is the Africa Biotechnology Conference, which was held in Sandton. And at the moment, I didn't even know what networking is, but we were encouraged to network. And through networking, I met Dr. Edson, who works at ARC at the Potchefstroom campus. And through talking to him, he linked me up with Dr. Jasparis. So in order to get into the program, you really have to be a hustler, be out there, research, Google, and find opportunities for yourself somehow. So after getting that information from Dr. Edson, I braved up. And then I wrote an email to Dr. Rees and asked him for a research project for my bachelor's at TUT. And then, he scheduled the meeting, and the rest is history. So I had been with the ARC for 9 years, and I've been under the supervision of Dr. Muchade since then. I think I'm a good student because I've been her student for the past 9 years. So after my bachelor's, then I was absorbed into what the ARC calls the Professional Development Program. So this is a program where ARC funds your research, they fund your studies, and then they fund your monthly upkeep. So I did my master's where I focused on statistical genomics, and then they also took me into the program where I'm now doing my doctoral studies in genetics. And this has been a journey of robust, like super hectic training. So this is still answering to the question that yes, our education system does really train us for jobs of the future because of the hectic training that I've been through in the ARC. There's excellent opportunities. The company puts you in a spotlight. There are excellent opportunities. And one of my highlights, apart from the many international travels and speaking on international platforms is the livestock improvement and bioinformatics training that I went through at the US through collaboration that the ARC BTP had with the United States Department of Agriculture, the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. This is where I spent a year in the USA, and I learned a lot. I learned different ways of thinking. The Americans think very fast and excellent and deep and critical. And I'm grateful to the ARC for giving me that opportunity. And our CEO always said that he doesn't train us for ARC, but he trains us for to go out there. So this is where that statement came really into life, because when I learned livestock improvement in America, I learned the application of genetics on the field through the African Goat Improvement Network and community-based breeding program, which we later launched in South Africa in Pella Village. So this is where deep and critical thinking was further installed in me, because to really make it in the field, you can't be average and you cannot think averagely. So one needs to think out of the box in order to fit into the jobs of the future, which involves high technology, innovation, and science. So while an institution trains us and gives us all these opportunities, it is really up to us what we do with all that. Are we going to be trained and sit around and wait for someone to employ us? If we are to be employed, are we equipped and empowered enough to work in those fields? And this, unfortunately, is not the responsibility of government, your institution, or even your supervisor. Our postgraduate education system equips us for jobs of the future. The rest depends on us. We also have to keep in mind that one, not everyone is meant to be an employee. And secondly, not everyone is meant to be an employer. A postgraduate journey is a journey of self-discovery. Are you an employer or an employee? And this is where you are going to, what are you going to do about it? So throughout your postgraduate journey, you discover yourself in that way. After battling to find employment, because ARC is on a contract base when you are in the professional development program. And there was a time I got an email that, listen, we're not renewing your contract, it's going to end on this time. So I had to really have a conference meeting with myself. And I was like, lady, are you going to, I've been looking for a job since. And I wasn't getting anything. And I sat with myself and I was like, okay, what's next? Am I going to sit and wait for someone to employ me, or am I going to start something? This is where I went into my research and thought, okay, I've been trained by the same company for 9 years. What do I have for the world? What do I have that I can offer? And I looked at my proposal, and unfortunately, no one is going to teach you to convert your proposal into a business model. But I had to look at all those things. Can I apply my research on field, and can I make it into a business? I'm skilled, and that's why now I moved into being a consultant and an agent. So I managed to find out that my research can be applied on field, is translational, it can be into a business. And that is where Giyangcube Agri Services was born. And here I am today. Through that education system and training, I managed to start a company, and I'm an employer of one person, which is myself. And the other part of the question was, do we include the youth in the mainstream economy? Well, at postgraduate level, yes. It is. Unfortunately for undergraduates, it's a different story. But at postgraduate, yes. And the ARC alone graduates over 250 postgraduate students, according to the 2017-18 annual report. And all those people are very young people. And through the training that I have been myself, I believe that every young person can be part or can play a role in the mainstream economy through the robust training that we go through. And I know that it's not only ARC that has these programs. I'm only speaking for ARC because that's where I've been trained. So that's it from me. I hope I've answered the question properly. Yeah, thank you.
You really have answered the question for us, and I'm so impressed. What an inspirational journey that you've been through, and I think I hope that some of our participants will take from that the inspiration that you brought and be encouraged to start something of their own, because you were going through the education system, as you said, and you found that what you were learning could be implemented in order to start a business. And this is what we are talking about when we talk about jobs of the future, that what you learn in school, you should be able to say, how do I implement it, not only to benefit myself, but to benefit the community at large. And right now, I think we have a question for Kia from Tebe Matubatuba, who asks if Kia Ncube will be able to provide agricultural scientific support to the rural community, and if so, what would be her feasible approach? Because your services are really needed in the rural areas. So what would be your answer to that, Gia?
Thank you, Tebe, for your question. Yes, I do provide, I can provide the services to rural communities. While I was still with the ARC, we worked with the Pela community, and I'm doing the same thing that I used to do. So what can happen is that whatever community that needs my services, I'm sure at the end we will share our social media handles and contacts. So what one needs to do is to contact me, let me know of your needs, and you can group together your community, and I come to where you are. That's how I've been doing it for the past. I mean, we launched the community-based breeding program in 2018, and since then we've been going to communities, and my company does the same. So you just tell us the needs of your community, and then we make an arrangement, and then I come to where you are. So how the services are given to the community, or the support, is through training. So we can organize workshops. It can either be a day. I have an online workshop coming on the 4th of July, which will be similar to what we are having today. If the community cannot log on, depending on where you are, then I come to where you are. Unfortunately, now due to COVID-19, it's not really easy to do physical meetings. But then, yeah, I come where you are, and then we have a workshop, and then we have a follow-up to see whether I need to come to your farms and then do a practical one-on-one training. So in short, yes.
Wow, okay, that's really great. I just also have a question. Are you working with the ARC in this community interventions that you're doing, or is it this just something that you're doing on your own? Because I really feel that you could get the government involved in what you're doing, and perhaps other institutions to make sure that the community is really serviced. Because I think, yes, you really your services, like Tebe has said, are really needed in the rural community.
Thanks, Batabile, for the question. Currently, I'm working on my own, but I do wish to work with government institutions and other companies where we can reach out to the communities in a large scope.
Okay, excellent, Kia. I just like for the other panelists to weigh in. Zipo and Zuko, I just want to hear from you with regards to what Kia had mentioned as to whether you think that the government, the educational system does prepare the youth for the jobs of the future. I'm just going to give you guys just a few seconds each, if you can, just weigh in on what your thoughts are on that. So I'll start with you, Zipho.
Thank you very much, moderator. Let me take this opportunity to greet those who have been able to join us for tonight's session, which is the youth perspective on the jobs of the future. Let me also join the president and as well as the opening speaker in echoing my cries for what we as a country are currently experiencing, and to say to the women of our country, from the very bottom of our hearts, we apologize for this brutality and unnecessary behavior. But now to come to your question, I am of the view that we are not doing enough to respond to, the education system is not doing enough to respond to the jobs of the future. As the first speaker has already alluded to say, she only experienced that response when she reached PhD level. I think one will appreciate that a lot of people, or a lot of students rather, do not get to the PhD level in South Africa. And that a student gets to university in pursuit of a qualification that will help them put food on the table at home. The reality is, not a lot of students come from families that can support or that can wait until one reaches a PhD level. Now, the journey to PhD level takes something like plus minus 6 years for one to complete. In those 6 years, one's family is normally living in abstract poverty, which is the case for most of us. And it's 12 years of schooling plus the 6 years in university just for you to reach PhD level. That is too long of a wait for one to endure. And I think something somewhere needs to change, especially when it comes to that transformation and in terms of how best we prepare the youth for those jobs of the future.
Thank you very much, Zipho. Zuko, would you like to weigh in?
Absolutely, absolutely. So with both the perspectives, jobs of the future with someone with a PhD level kind of an experience and someone who doesn't, which is a lot of us are there. I've seen positives on both sides of, on both sides. I mean, like for me, over the years where I've been moving around, participating in entrepreneurial competitions here in South Africa and internationally, I've really been encouraged, for example, if you're participating, there's a continental entrepreneurial competition in South Africa, I would look at the amount of people from, look at the number of people from South Africa. It would be bigger than most countries, and I would even go as far as looking in terms of population dynamics, and then I'd see South Africa being up there with countries with big population sizes like Nigeria, and I thought that, maybe our education system is onto something, or the people of South Africa just have resilience. But on the other side, what I've seen, it was, I'm into manufacturing of consumer electronics, so some parts of the product that we've been working on for a number of years now, we were not able to work on this here in South Africa. I mean, like I'd call a factory, for example. This is a paper a packaging factory, and I call a salesperson. A salesperson says, our engineer is not available. So we will get back to you with the details, with the codes, when I have been able to speak with our engineer. And then you call China, the same factory, the same salesperson gives you the figures, gives you everything. And then I am there, I'm stranded. I mean, like at Senso in our company, we wanted to localize as many aspects as possible, but working in South Africa has been difficult. And I've been particularly interested to find out, is this our education, or is it just our attitude as humans? Just to wrap this up now quickly, and I felt both sides at the PhD level. I mean, like I read somewhere the other day, someone in Cape Town committed suicide. He was unemployed for a very long time. He had a PhD qualification, you know. So on that, I think I'm just gonna leave it like that. I will not be able to share any conclusive contribution in terms of if it's a yes or if it's a no.
Okay, I hear you there. And I mean, yeah, what you're raising is really sad about when you can't find jobs because really the quality not paid you enough for the outside world, or there are no instruments or opportunities that are being made available by government and the institutions in South Africa to support I mean, promoting your skills after you get that qualification. And on that note, I'd like to ask you, Zipho, as you have said that you weighed in on this matter, and you said that you don't the youth for the jobs of the future. And I just want you to there are instruments or opportunities available to foster innovation and amongst the youth in South Africa. If you could give us your take as someone who is a business development of the innovation agency. So if you could just tell what is your
Thank you very much to the moderator once again. Yes.
Sorry, Zipho. Sorry, Zippo. It's together. We've just lost Batabile. I'd just like to come in and just repeat the question that she was trying to ask to you, Zippo. And that is, can you please address to us if there are any support instruments or opportunities available to foster innovation and entrepreneurship amongst the youth? Thanks, Zippo.
Thank you, Tugela. Yes, there are instruments and mechanisms in place to foster innovation as well as entrepreneurship. To mention some which sit with the institution that I'm at, we've got the Technology Development Fund, which assists innovators from higher education institutions, science councils, SMMEs, startups to advance technologies along the innovation value chain, from proof of concept to prototyping, as well as technology demonstration. We've also got what we call the Commercialization Support Fund, which connects technology innovators from higher education institutions, science council, SMMEs, to prepare innovators for follow-up funding through limited support to market testing and validation. We also have what we call the technology innovation stations. We've got 18, yeah, it is 18. We have 18 across the country. We have 18 technology transfer stations across the country. These are at the higher education institutions, from Durban University of Technology to Mangosuthu University of Technology, University of Limpopo, Walter Sisulu University, University of Western Cape, CPUT, which is the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. We have some just across the road here at TUT. These are just some of the instruments that sit within TIA to foster innovation and entrepreneurship. But there are also other funding instruments such as SEDA, which is a network of incubators across the country, which aim to assist grassroots innovators with upskilling them and teaching them the trades of how to enter the market. Unfortunately, some of these never reach the intended recipients, partly due to the lengthy processes involved, as well as the geographical makeup of South Africa. But this is something that we are working with municipalities through a series of other programs to try and resolve and ensure that these programs reach their intended audience. Thank you, Tugela.
Thank you very much, Zipho. I would like to just open up to the other panel members to also input on this question. We'll start with Zuko. What is your view on this particular question?
I actually am of the very same view that indeed we do have a lot of support instruments, and there's a lot of opportunities available here in South Africa that encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. Speaking there, I've really accessed quite a number of these, and I've seen a number of other entrepreneurs launching their companies using some of these opportunities. I actually say this in comparison to different other countries, you know, looking what the guys in Lagos, what they have access to, looking at the guys in the capital of Kenya, what they have access to. And South Africa is just unmatched from both the government and the private sector. You know, obviously a lot can still be done here, and it always feels like what just has to be done is the trend when it comes to these opportunities. Entrepreneurs are just, you know, given a bag full of money. Hey, go, you know, go start a business, you know. And one thing we often leave behind is to actually build the character of an entrepreneur, in order for that entrepreneur, you know, to stand the test of time, and have the strong character, because the road is quite long. It requires a lot of resilience. It requires one to really to be level-headed and stuff. So one thing we often leave behind, you know, in these programs where we support entrepreneurs, it is entrepreneurs themselves. I mean, like Zippo was just mentioning, the test stations. I've seen the technology workstations. I've seen a number of those, and the focus in all of these, it is just the product and the business, never the person who's supposed to run with the vision, run with this. But I've been impressed seeing a number of, just two actually here in South Africa, where I've observed that the entrepreneur is also given the attention, is supported emotionally, the counseling, which is something that I hope it will, you know, widen, and then we can see if there's a technology workstation that's a tier 2, for example, there's also an access to psychologists to support the entrepreneur emotionally and otherwise.
Thanks, Zuko. We actually have a question from one of the participants that I would like us to just deliberate on. Diani Chauke is saying, do you have suggestions on what the youth should do in order to start the process of owning tomorrow's means of production with respect to 4IR and knowledge economy? It is dangerous to have a society whose economy is not in the hands of the native inhabitants. So he's opening this question to the panel.
Wow, that's an incredible question.
Mm-hmm.
That's an incredible question. This is where we're finding ourselves as, you know, as Sensor. So our aim, it was to localize every possible aspect of everything that we do at Sensor, making sure that the startup or the product, it benefits the economy of this country, you know. But we were forced, because we don't have the means of production. We still got part of the tooling processes. We still had to get this done in China. Some of these we got this done in Switzerland. It's difficult, but it will, like they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. I felt like the fact that we are starting by making sure that the sensor device in its packaging does not have the words made in China, it was a great start for us. Then we can work little by little as we're building, because really we are not taken serious, if I can put it that way. I mean, like, you'd have someone who's willing to invest in a business saying, I will invest in a business provided that you do this and that and that and that and that in China, simply because people want instant gratification in a way. And the team and I at Sensor, we are in it for the long haul. We've focused really on our value chain, making sure that when we actually localize everything, we start building the foundation of all of that now, you know, which we've, the progress has really been great for us. So yeah, I like this question. Thank you for it, Diani Chauke.
Thanks, Zuko, for that comprehensive response. I also wanted to highlight something that Dr. Palisa Skejana has just mentioned in the Q&A, which I think is also very important. She says that I also can imagine it's difficult to start up companies to make it in South Africa. I've also noticed that we leave a lot to be done by research councils, and we need to drive a mode of multi-stakeholder collaboration that involves business such as yours. She says she's writing as a researcher in the Research Council. I think she's raising a very important point there. I see Batavile is back online. So I'm gonna hand over to you, Batavile, to move on with the rest of the questions. Batavile?
Hi, Tukela. It's Fariso.
Yes.
Batavile is gone again. We'll try again. I think we can Kia on the question that the topic that the question that we're doing, we're focusing on do you have anything that you would like to add on with regards to the support instruments or opportunities available to foster innovation and entrepreneurship amongst the youth?
Thank
Yeah.
you, Faruko. Oh yeah, thank you. I think Zippo and Zuko have stressed much on the support that is available. And I'm going to talk about it from a completely different angle. I believe when coming to innovation, support starts from home. I have worked with young scholars from as young as grade 6 through the ESCOM Expo. And I've seen how these young kids have excellent innovations. And I believe you have to have a certain type of a parent who would even allow you as a child to put your time into these projects. So they get support from home, they get support from their teachers, and they compete from regional level up to international level. So an innovative mind is actually created or supported from home. So I believe we have parents within the panel and even the attendees. So how are you raising your kids? Are you giving them support? Are you encouraging their innovation? Are you encouraging their entrepreneurship muscle? You know, one day my niece was saying that she wants to sell lemonade. And we're like, oh, okay, that's a great idea. And she's only 8. So this is somebody who is already thinking as a businesswoman at the age of 8. So for me, support starts from home. So yes, there is support, but I think parents have to rethink how they interact with their children and how they support them. There is support in schools. Like I've been working with ESCOM Expo since 2018, and they have great support from their teachers. Their teachers travel with them. Some of them, unfortunately, because of work and their parents cannot travel with them up to the highest level. And when they get to international, sometimes they get funding from other institutions, and some even get funded to study abroad, and then some get funded to commercialize their products. So in summary, yes, there is support, but I really, really would like to stress from home that sometimes you get support from the outside, but it means even more when parents support their children, irrespective of what age. You know, sometimes you are at postgraduate level and then you go to your mom or your dad and say, hey, I have this idea, but they think, you're crazy. So for me personally, I think we need to look at it more from home, and everywhere else up there. And another thing, what kind of support are we talking about? We have narrowed down support to be financial. I don't know if it's because there's so much poverty in the country that we have narrowed down support to be financial or what. But there are many kinds of support systems that can help you uplift your startup company without even them giving you money. And I learned this last year through the Black Women in Science Fellowship, where we had an entrepreneurship workshop. And I learned that almost every company has a division of enterprise. And that is where you can approach them depending on your field, and then you can ask for support. So some companies will not give you money, but they can help you with marketing. Some companies will not give you money, but they can sponsor your trip to go somewhere, to go and polish your skills on whatever innovation that you are doing. So we really have to rethink a whole lot of things. When you go and approach a company, if they can't give you money, are you going to walk away, or are you going to ask for something else? So definitely there is lots of support, and we have to look at it on different angles and take it head on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kia. Let's now talk about the issue of 4IR. There's a question in the Q&A section from Arinao Muntu. It's targeted to you, Zippo, and he would like to know, as a business developer, Are your developments aligned with the 4IR that we are currently entering? And also, do you have any suggestions or business advice on what direction a person might want to take full advantage of 4IR in the long term or short term? Zippo?
Thank you, Tukela. That is a very interesting question, Ariano. South Africa has a strategy on 4IR, and this is informed by the recent development of a white paper on science and innovation. There's an entire section in the white paper. I think for those of us who are part of this conversation, it would be very valuable to familiarize ourselves with the contents of that white paper, which is basically the medium to long-term guide of South Africa's pathway in terms of science and innovation. The second part of the question, which refers to suggestions or business advice, maybe it is fitting that I first give you a background of what it is that I actually do, because I see that it has been captured as a business developer. I am a business development officer under international partnerships. In what I do, I service international partnerships that the Technology Innovation Agency enters into with other international funding organizations. We do this in line with what the Department of Science and Innovation decides to pursue in terms of reaching out to other international institutions and governments. The advice that I can offer you as someone who wants to take advantage of the 4IR is to say, be part of the conversation, familiarize yourself with the trends and the developments and the market projections that exist in the market. So, for instance, you will know that a number of studies are saying that in the next 15 years, 40% of all employees will be in Africa, and that the top 100 big cities, a majority of them will also be in Africa. You, as someone who's a business developer, needs to ask yourself simple questions. What do people in a big city need? And try and devise business solutions around those questions, so that you are in a position in 10 years to 15 years from now to actually compete for a market share. If you think today you're going to compete with someone who's already established, you are a little bit late. And I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it would be better to project yourself in saying, okay, these areas are covered today. What can I do to place myself in such a way that the 4IR actually needs me? And I think this is also linking to the question of education. For some of us who are already approaching the twilight of our youth years, it might be a bit late for us to participate in that space meaningfully. So we as the youth need to play a dynamic role in terms of shaping where South Africa goes and in its response for the fourth industrial revolution. We need to play a dynamic role in ensuring that the conversation does the best that it can to provide the right education from primary school. It provides the right education for high school, and it provides the right programs for university students, the right support for university students. We also need to ask questions as young people, which also links to this issue of business advice. When are we going to push for robotics to be part of the curriculum at schools, because we know, and COVID-19 has demonstrated to us, that practical solutions such as robots that have been collecting medication on behalf of patients where we couldn't come into contact with each other under this pandemic. Robots, some places in India, they're already ahead of us, although they couldn't produce as many as they would have loved to. But you would simply program a robot to say, go to this address of this doctor and collect medication on my behalf. And we could have done this as well, but it's just that we haven't been doing robotics. So I make that as an example to say, we can learn a lot of lessons from how other countries have done in terms of preparing for this transition that we are currently in. This will also require policy on our behalf. This is where our youthness could be excused for being patriotic and asking for things rather than just waiting for them to happen. We need to heed a call and take a leaf from the youth of 1976 and do things that are going to change and shape the future on our behalf.
Thank you very much, Zipho. I mean, you've said a mouthful, and you've given us all a lot to think about, especially in terms of where you weighed in on the educational system, starting from primary school all the way up to university, as to what are the needs that we need to be looking into, especially when it comes to jobs of the future. Right now, before we take any more questions, I see that there's a lot of people who have a lot of questions that they want to weigh in on, and we're gonna get to that. And I also like our panelists, when they can weigh in on some of the questions, to go into the chat with our participants and answer some of their questions. But I want you, Zuko, at the moment to weigh in on something. As you are someone who is a CEO, who has had to use these instruments and opportunities that Zipho told us about that are available to foster innovation and entrepreneurship, what further interventions and support mechanisms by the government and the industry do you think can be directed to the youth to address youth unemployment, Zuko?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zuko Mandlakazi. I'm a founder of Sensor. I founded Sensor because I grew up with a family member who has always been hard of hearing. If we're speaking like this, she won't hear you. You have to speak super loud for her to hear you. This was now in my rural home, and no one was speaking about this challenge faced by a family member of mine. And people were just speaking super loud. These my cousins, my aunt's children, and some people. This is where now it became frustrating for me when people would speak about my aunt like she's not there when she is there. Then I thought that when I'm old enough, I would get my aunt this device, and then people then can stop this. You know, unfortunately, I became old, and working, and I started to look for these devices. You know, because this is something that had occupied me for the very long time. You know, since I was a teenager. So when I looked for these devices, there was nothing that I could find, and my journey began, you know, and it began simply by looking at what other deaf people were using, what kind of devices, how these people were living their lives, spend time with a number of families that allow me. The entire household would be deaf. The parents are deaf, and then now because of genetics, the kids are also deaf too. And it's a challenge to be alert to life-saving sounds for the entire family. You know, some would have things that dangle in the house, and that would mean now a person have to look at the door for this thing to dangle in order to get an alert that someone is knocking from outside. I thought that there should be a better way, and the journey began. You know, obviously I was the a first generation professional at home. I had no savings or investments. Well, I had to build this, you know. Then I started by participating on entrepreneurial competition. It has been mentioned here, all of these support available. And the first entrepreneurial competition was actually run by one of the government agencies, the Innovation Hub. I won second prize there. We started prototyping. And we moved to the next phase. I went into another entrepreneurial competition. I got funding there. We prototyped. We kept on prototyping. We go to the users, and I spend time with this family, conduct focus groups. What is it that you want? What do you want the device to do? How much do you want to buy this for? People, they tell us, I want the device to do this. I want it to do this. And then I just discuss with the team. We continued. This, unfortunately, is that's the ugly part about these entrepreneurial competitions. They take so long, you know. And but eventually years have passed, and by last year we had filed patents in 43 countries. We had raised over 4 million rands in equity, funding, entrepreneurial competition, innovation competition here in South Africa, Rwanda, Switzerland, Sweden, many countries. We had passed statutory approvals for ICASA here in South Africa, for the CE mark for Europe, and the pre-compliance for FCC in the USA. You know, so we have always focused within the global community, because one thing that we learned very early on in the prototyping stages, it was people were having this challenge globally, you know, where people are struggling to find devices that speak with them. And we were lucky. The other time we were in Sudan, a trip paid for by the Department of Science and Innovation, and we got to conduct focus groups there. And people told us in Sudan, this is what we'd like to see in a device. We'd like it to do this and that, all of those kind of things. And all of these feedbacks from different, I think we conducted focus groups in 8 different countries. And we had this data that we used then from all of these. But one thing that was good though, it was the fact that challenges faced by the deaf communities are quite universal. And originally the misconception that we had, it was that we were going to have a device that would make specifically for the South African market, a device for the European market, device for the USA. But through all of these focus groups that we conducted in all of these 8 different countries in Asia, in Europe, and here in the African continent, we were able to make a device that speaks to challenges faced by people in all of these different countries. Now, to take this experience based on what we've seen over the years, right through this journey, and one particular example is what I've seen in China, where the Chinese got me to see the difference between education and skill. You know, I'd be in China, and in China, I'm like, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with a tooling engineer. And then the room is full with tooling engineers. And then I want to do that exercise in South Africa. Hey, can I have a conversation with tooling engineers? It takes weeks before I can speak with a tooling engineer. And then I got to see that, you know, people, they go to school, they do their engineering, and then they get misplaced. They don't get to do what they studied at school. They get the education, and then the skill isn't there. So one of the things now I have really been keen, and I've really been keen to follow up and learn a lot, because we're building a company. We want to employ as many South Africans in our company. We don't want to go in India or in China to get the kind of skills that are right for the kind of product or the kind of business that we're trying to build here. And what we've seen, it's really that lack of skills. So this point, what our government and the industry can do, you know, to address the youth unemployment, I feel that it's specifically there, you know, let's get our youth skilled, you know, because one of the things I've seen really in China, these guys, they are not educated through programs. Some they get sent to Switzerland, some they get sent to Germany, you know, for a 6 months program. That's a skill, you know, and they get that skill, they plow it back in their community, they teach one another that particular skill, and it has worked for them. And they have this abundance of skills now. The global community, they do everything there because of this skill. You know, a lot of people are saying that these other country, like other countries in north of Asia, are taking over manufacturing. It's no longer cheap to do manufacturing in China. It's much cheaper in another country. You know, but one thing that keeps on, or that has sustained, you know, with what we saw, it is the skill with the Chinese, you know, and they keep on getting better with this. I mean, we are still talking about the fourth industrial revolution. These guys that are on the fifth, talking about the human-centered approach, you know, and I'd say that takes a skill. So I feel that anyone can get a skill. You know, you can take the YouTube tutorials, and then you get a skill that you can use to create something for yourself, part-time job, or create a company even, you know, with that particular skill, you know. And I feel that's where we just need to invest a lot of our efforts as the government, as the people, where we actually can build people's skills instead of education. I mean, like last year, I'm saying last year, excuse me there, last night, I saw a video clip of the girl in the rural Eastern Cape. People were making a big deal about this, that this girl has a degree, you know, but she's just making bricks. This is because of unemployment and all of these kind of things. And I'm like, that's the skill. She's gonna need something. I mean, a skill, you can get it not necessarily behind the desk at school. You know, there's a number of ways people can obtain skills, you know. So I felt that maybe if we could invest, you know, and we invest a great deal of incentives in encouraging people to be skilled. I mean, like there's also been this way that colleges are looked at, you know, NQF level 3s, level 1, 2, 3, 4, the way that these are also undermined. And you look at the skill, I mean, like these guys, a lot of time, they just do practical work versus to theory. I mean, like there's a number of degrees, some different qualifications, different demands in the market, you know, but technically speaking, some of these colleges I've seen in different countries, they tend to be strong when it comes to that particular setup. So yeah, just giving a very short answer, or just closing what I've just been sharing now, I'd say that a skill, you know, investing in skilling people and getting people to understand that a skill can be cultivated in different settings, you know.
I had to now weigh in on there, but thank you very much. And I think one thing that you've highlighted that I think we've all in so far been agreeing on is that the education system somehow needs to change to be able to match up with what is happening in the world and match up with how we see, what's happening in terms of jobs of the future. And I think I can also put it into context with what's happening right now with what the pandemic that we have, that children need to be educated, or the youth need to be educated and given skills in such a way that when you have a pandemic that comes out of the blue that we are not expecting, then we cannot say we are not prepared in terms of people losing their jobs, in terms of us needing new technologies to take over what we knew as normal life, but for people to just be prepared to embrace the new normal. And that requires a lot of skills, because we would have to sort of unlearn what we had learned and quickly take up new skills to be able to, let's say, come up with technologies or make products that will improve the quality of life of people during a pandemic, for example. So I think we all agree that the education system now needs to change in a way that it now focuses on skills. And I'm glad that you brought that up, and all of the panelists have been bringing that up in so far. So I think we have a few questions that are coming in there from our participants. There's a lot of them, and I think for now, I think we should really just focus on those questions so that we give our participants a chance to have their voices heard. So just while we are there with you, Zuko, if you can just tell us, because you talked about getting skills, and you talked about how you traveled all over the world, being able to, to be exposed to all of these things. But for someone who probably just doesn't have the opportunity as yet, what would you say is the importance of having a mentor in your business venture? And would these mentors be easily accessible or not? Like someone like you, would you say you would be easily accessible?
Yes, I mentor. I work for a startup, early stage startup. So the time really is quite stressed, because when working for a startup, you are everything for that company. The other day an accountant, the other day an engineer, you're a designer, you are a delivery person, you're a customer service person. But I always make sure, because I know the South African landscape within the space that our company operates in. They are very rare. I mean, I have, before the device that we have produced at Sensor, which we are currently setting up manufacturing for, we had never had people get these devices from outside South Africa, then they rebrand. Now with Sensor, we've made it possible to ideate, produce a proof of concept, develop a solution, using people's feedback to make sure that the device speaks to these people. And then, like I mentioned, with the patents fail, are filed in 43 countries and statutory approvals that meet these global standards. I really, these things, I learned all of these through, I made a lot of mistakes. Some, they cost me a lot of money, even to find collaborators in our tooling processes. I mean, like just last year, we lost about 100,000 because of an incorrect partner. And then we had to start the process again. I don't want any other South African to go through that very same thing again. So each and every time whenever I'm available, I make the time. I assist wherever I can. There's there's one young lady that's coming up with a device now. It's within this where it's something that could potentially dent the scourge of these gender-based violence. It's a device that could be used, I mean, to make sure that our sisters, or girl children, or even our aunts, mothers, no one is safe really, have something that they can use to attract the attention and be safeguarded. That spoke with me as someone who's a father to a 10-year-old child with a lot of sisters and cousin sisters, a mother, and so on and so forth. So I do mentor people when I have the time, and I always take questions from people, and I'm easily accessible on Facebook and Twitter. And yeah, I really wouldn't like to see people go through what I went through, in terms of losing money that you can't even afford to lose, because you actually have to obtain data. You have to fail to know, I don't want other people to go through that. So I advise.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you please just quick in a few seconds, just please share your handles on social media quickly so that people can be able to access you on social media, because I think for the youth of today, this is the most simple medium that they use to be able to access people that they would have otherwise not have access to. So quickly just share your social media handles for us.
Absolutely. I am just Zuko Mandlagazi on Facebook, Zuko Mandlagazi, and on Twitter, my handle is Rural Brayo, one word. So yeah, those are social media platforms that I utilize a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think you've answered that one for us on mentors. And if you have anything further that you can weigh in on, I think just to all the panelists, if you can look at these questions even later once the session is over, and just go to the Languni social media platforms and try to answer some of the questions which you don't have time to answer, because now I'm going to need us to be very quick and brief in answering the questions. There is a question from Arinao Muntu who says, the modern growth in cross and multidisciplinary research in academia has already had huge impact on the world around us. This is without doubt going to reshape the job market for scientists around the world. Where do you think the job market will be in maybe 10 to 15 years for scientists? I guess this one is directed mostly to me and Kea. Kea, would you like to start? And then once you've given us an answer to this, I'll weigh in.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, thanks, Arinao. I think in the next 10 to 15 years, jobs would look, when you look at the science world, it's still very traditional, especially in South Africa. I'll talk mostly on my field, because when coming to most of the technologies, we're still a little bit behind. So in the next 10 to 15 years, the science world will completely be a different model. And in Africa, we really need to catch up very fast, because if we don't, then we will be left behind. Science will no longer be done in a traditional way as before. We already have things like hydroponic farming when coming to agriculture. So that is where the science world will be. As a scientist, when you look at your work, can you think ahead to say, when coming to, for instance, city farming, people now do farming in their houses, they do farming in their glass houses, or like the hydroponics. So that's where science will be. I don't know if I'm answering this properly, but it will completely be reshaped. We need to unlearn the traditional science and be more innovative. So in future, science will be more innovation and high tech. That's the little I can say. Thank you.
Yes, I think that, thank you so much, Kea. I think that you really on what I was going to touch on, and I'd just like to add, in the question, it's right what they said about multidisciplinary. For example, I'm a biotechnologist, background in pharmaceutical sciences and chemistry and analytical chemistry, and I work with mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and so research has stopped being about I'm a pharmaceutical scientist, therefore I will develop drugs for certain diseases, because sometimes an electrical engineer to work with a pharmaceutical scientist and a biochemist and a chemist in order to develop a drug that's designed to somehow work electronically in the body. So that's no longer a drug, but a device. And this is where science is going, where we are trying to just put together devices or products as quickly as possible, to be able to provide solutions that are easy and efficient, so that sometimes we want to have a one size fits all for a variety of diseases or a variety of problems. And therefore, that's why we need to come together as all in all the science fields to come together to provide solutions for this. So, for example, what Kea talked about it with biotechnology is that farming will be different from what it is now, where where we now use greenhouses. And I think in some ways this will be good, but in some other ways, like for example, where people let's say, where people are concerned about genetically modified products, we'll also need to work together to find how can we grow plants in a way that does not harm individuals. So I think that's where science is going. But another thing that I think will also not be such a popular opinion that most scientists have, I think we tend to, when it comes to us, and especially in Africa, we tend to rush to jump onto the technology wagon without realizing that there are so many problems of the past that we have not solved. There are people who still don't have access to water, people who still don't have access to the toilets that you and I use currently, but we want to develop new toilets that are smarter and more efficient, where people don't even have those facilities that were used 60 years ago. So yes, we have to move with technology, as I've said, and I'm all for that. But also as Africans, so what I said when I introduced this session was that we need to find solutions that cater for the African market and not just try to jump onto the technology wagon because that's where the rest of the world is going. Because we really need to provide solutions to our society first before going global. Okay, I'm sorry, I was struggling to see some of the questions. We have a question from Lekutu who said, I wish children could start project learning from grade 4, because this thing of starting agricultural sciences at the age of 15 in grade 10 is not working. Radical change in the education system will help future generations. How should we encourage youth to enroll in agricultural sciences and other ground streams like farming and tourism? Kia, I think that this is also about agriculture. So I'd like to weigh in on it first, and then we'll ask the other panelists, because it also has to do with the education system as well.
Okay, thanks again, and thanks, Lekgotlo. Well, unfortunately, at this moment, there's not much that one can do in terms of, especially basic education, because things come from the leaders. The syllabus is already set up. I think I answered in the comments that most of the things are extramural activities for children. For instance, with Eskom Expo, kids are allowed to participate in projects, and we have a field of agricultural sciences, and we have mentors within the program, so that even if there's no agriculture in grade 4, but when a child enters certain competitions, they get a mentor, a one-on-one mentor. Like, for instance, Miss Edith Palani, she's one of the attendees. She's a mentor within the Eskom Expo, and I also work closely with her. So we have very young kids that we train on one-on-one. Unfortunately, us as panelists, there's nothing we can do to change the education system, but there are programs that are there and they are made available for kids. And the other unfortunate part is that schools are very much aware of these programs. So it depends. Like I was saying also that to Nikiwe, that it depends on where you are based. And unfortunately, townships and rural areas are always left behind. But with the programs that I work with, sometimes it's not that they don't know, but there is no participation. There is one area that we have been battling with within Eskom Expo, that we've been going there, that we need your kids to participate, but there's no response. So sometimes we may say that, there's no this and that, but the moment you come closer and work with the schools and these communities, you realize that we have deeper problems than just the child coming to participate. Sometimes you don't even get participation from the schools themselves. Sometimes the children don't get support from home. That's why I was saying earlier on that I think support needs to start from home. What are you saying as a parent when your child comes and say, I have this idea that is agricultural? Are you supporting them as a parent? Because that's where it starts. So then from there, that's when a kid can come back and say, there's this thing, it's Eskom Expo, and they can start bothering their teachers, they can start bothering their parents, and they participate. So all these things are there, but the issue is that there's no accessibility, and the other issue is participation. And if you're in school and you know about Eskom Expo and the teacher says no, what do you do as a child in grade 4? And we went to an area last year through the Rural Education Festival. We had grade 6 and 7 kids, and they knew nothing about agriculture. But unfortunately, us standing here, there's not much that we can do, but we need to encourage learners to participate in extra activities. At the current moment, the only thing that we have is extra activities, and kids need to be pushed to participate. Kids and teachers in rural areas, in townships, need to be pushed to enroll their children in this.
Okay, so right now we would, I want to take some closing comments from
Have we lost the moderator?
Okay, I'm back now. I'm sorry about that. I want to take some closing comments quickly, a few seconds from Zippo. And right after that, we are gonna have one of the participants close off for us, who is Nikki. We'll give her a minute to weigh in on the matter. But for now, Zippo, please give me your closing statements.
Thank you very much, moderator. First and foremost, I'd like to clarify something on the way that we understand China and how they got to where they are in terms of innovation. I think it is critical that we understand and appreciate their journey and how they protected their markets until they were ready to enter the international space. When we were much younger, in the late 90s, early 2000s, their policies used to be ridiculed and often made jokes about. I remember how we would say that a child in China in grade 4 is building a watch for you while you sit here and learn about the low caste. They are where they are because of policy. And this leads me to a challenge that I would like to issue out to every young person who's part of this dialogue on this month. As young people, we need to stop this thing of recusing ourselves of our own responsibilities. When Hector Peterson died, he was 12 years old. And here we are approaching 30s and 35 and 40s, some of us. And we keep saying, no, we can't change this, we can't change that. We need to stop with that and take responsibility of our own lives. I often say to those that know me personally, that the old people will not hand over things to us. We need to take it from them and say, this is our future and we deserve better. And this is a challenge that goes out to each and every person who's listening. In whatever space you are in, make it a habit to challenge the status quo, because the truth is, as young people, we are unemployed, our lives are passing us by. And some of the interventions which I often think about and mention in my cycles is to say, South Africa needs to do better to protect the informal sector space, which I guess answers to one of the questions that came earlier, to say it is dangerous to have an economy that is not in the hands of the inhabitants. South Africa needs to learn from other African countries and European countries. Countries like Ghana, you can't just go and participate in the informal sector. You can't go participate in the informal sector in Tanzania. You can't go participate in the informal sector.
Okay, Zipho, we are very close to closing time, and promised one participant that we'll give her just 1 minute. So I think we should go on to her and then see if we will have some time after this. Can we open for Nikiwe?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, moderator, and greetings to the panelists and the host, Ilanguni. Thank you for the time. I think Kia was trying to answer some of the questions, but as an educator, I think also, besides the fact that maybe parents might not support the kids, and sometimes we also don't get enough support from our schools. I've taken kids for projects, like I was teaching here at a high school for the water project. I think first there was this one that the kids proposed, which was the sensor, to say that if maybe you are fighting for bacteria in the toilets and people, they are touching the taps and so on. So they were introducing a sensor that water must just open and then close when you are leaving. So that means the tap cannot be left leaking. So I think I've observed that in some of the garage when I go to Eastern Cape. And when it comes to the instruments, I still believe that there is not much of the support, because if the kids have innovated that and they won a second prize for it, because most of the time they would use recycled materials, they won't even use like things that they buy and so on, but they will just use what is available to them. But they would propose great ideas. For instance, the one for water, when the water is stopped, and they will introduce an alarm system so that people can be able to hear the alarm, and they would close the taps, because most of the time, amanzi mayiphelile, ushiyita apha ekitchen ivuliwe, and to the flood. So there are so many projects. I think also I have judged the ESCOM Expo events. But the challenge is that support after that, ayikho ukuthi labantwana can actually do these things or motivate other kids outside the school system. And I want to say we also lack science clubs in the communities, science centers, because this is where our kids can explore their ideas besides the school system. Because at the current school where I'm teaching, I have introduced permaculture. Abantwana, they were excited to plant. We went to the presentation, we had the school of some representative, and the principal, like, you find that you're not getting support as an educator as well. So it would be nice to do these things outside the school and involve other kids from different schools, and they just have this team. So I would like if maybe we can have even such programs going out in the communities and support the kids in the rural areas as well. Thank you.
Okay, Nikki, well, we hear you, and thank you very much for pointing that out in terms of support from the kids, support from this, from the parents, support from the schools as well, and probably support from nonprofit organizations such as Ilanguni. I think, yeah, we've touched on that. Thank you very much to everyone who's participated on this webinar today. We have run out of time, and I guess this shows that we had very insightful conversations. And thank you to the three panelists. Wow, it's been so great hearing everything that you've had to say and share with all the young people out there. I think this will be on YouTube, if I am not wrong, and people will be able to see and hear these conversations that we've had today. And I think then we could call it a night. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you very much to Languni for this platform. And I'll hand over for closing remarks from Refilwe.
Thank you, Dr. Batavile. Yeah, so I'll be very quick. I hope I'm audible. I hope that today's discussions really unpack some critical considerations in preparing the youth for jobs of the future. While there are opportunities available, there's still a lot that needs to be done. There are lessons that we can take from other countries in preparing our youth for the future. Innovation definitely presents some exciting opportunities, but support mechanisms are required in order to see the fruits that can be derived from innovation. The challenges faced by the youth of 1976 might have been different, but there are great similarities: poverty, youth unemployment rates, gender-based violence, and other social ills. We need to do more in developing products that are made in South Africa, just like sensors, hearing devices. To those who have businesses and have the resources, we encourage you to offer training programs to teach others on being independent. We believe there is a space for everyone to be successful. We also encourage participants to take up opportunities or take up the support offered by the Technology Innovation Agency and skills development programs offered by the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. I shared some of the details in our chat if you need that information. There are opportunities available, and our role as Languni is to basically raise awareness and connect people to these opportunities. We encourage the youth to ease up on being dependent on government to provide these opportunities and take the first step to establish opportunities for themselves and others, rather than being an employee, rather employ someone and become the employer. We hope this conversation has sparked something in all of you to embark on starting something new to sustain yourselves. We thank you as Languni, and we would like to call on you to collaborate with us. If you have any ideas that you would like to work with us on, please do get in touch with us via email. The email details are there for your reference. Please do engage with us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Once again, I would like to thank the panelists and for everyone connecting. We really do appreciate the support, and please do continue to engage with us beyond this discussion. Thank you, everyone, and have yourselves a good evening.
Thank you, Languni. Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.